The late afternoon sun draped the hills of Finger Lakes in a quiet golden haze when Michael Hayes pulled up to the end of Seneca Ridge Road. The property he came to see stood apart from the rest, a two-story colonial framed by maple trees just beginning to turn red. The air smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke. It felt, strangely, like the kind of place where silence had its own heartbeat. Michael stepped out of his car, straightened his jacket, and looked at the house with cautious admiration. 37, divorced for a year, he had promised himself a simpler life. Something slower, quieter than the constant noise of Rochester finance meetings and half-empty apartments. When his real estate agent called that morning about a quick sale on Seneca Ridge, it sounded too convenient to ignore. Inside, the house was immaculate. The hardwood floors shone as if someone had just polished them. A faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. Every room was fully furnished. Oak furniture, framed paintings, even dishes in the cupboards. "It's being sold as is," the agent explained, flipping through the documents. "The owner's moving overseas. Wants to close before the end of the week." "You're getting a real bargain, Michael. 30% below market." Michael frowned lightly. "That's a lot of value to walk away from." "Divorce, maybe? Debt? Who knows?" the agent shrugged. "But the paperwork's clean. County records verified this morning." He walked through the living room, running his hand along the cold stone of the fireplace. Everything about the place whispered too perfect, yet somehow he felt drawn to it. Maybe it was the silence, the sense of being outside time. After months of sleepless nights and aimless drives, maybe this was what peace looked like. He turned back to the agent. "Let's do it. Full payment, standard escrow. I'll sign today." As the papers were signed, somewhere miles away, Thomas Lewis, former owner of the house, was finishing his own glass of bourbon at the airport lounge in New York City. Beside him, a woman nearly 15 years younger scrolled through her phone, smiling at photos of the Spanish villa they would soon call home. Thomas leaned back, relieved. He had sold everything he wanted to forget. The memories, the illness, and the woman who had become a burden in that house. He told himself that freedom always came at a price, and this time, someone else had paid it for him. By the time Michael returned to Seneca Ridge, the sky had deepened into the smoky blue of early evening. A thin mist rolled off the lake, softening the outlines of the trees. He parked his car in the gravel drive and stood there for a long moment, listening to the steady rhythm of crickets. It had been years since he'd felt this kind of calm. He carried the last box inside, setting it beside the kitchen island. On impulse, he reached for a bottle of aged scotch, his quiet tradition for new beginnings, and poured a small glass. The amber liquid caught the last light of day as he walked through the hallway, admiring the warm glow on the walls. Maybe this was it, he thought. A fresh start, a place where the world would finally stop asking him to rush. Outside, the wind shifted. Leaves rustled across the porch. Somewhere, a loose shutter tapped faintly against the siding. He smiled at the small imperfections. It gave the place character. Carrying his drink, he climbed the stairs to take one last look at the second floor before unpacking for the night. The corridor smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume. A bedroom door stood half open, its curtains moving slightly in the breeze from a cracked window. Michael hesitated, then chuckled to himself. "You're just tired." "Hayes," he murmured, closing the door gently. Back downstairs, he sank into the couch, scotch in hand, letting the quiet settle. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the entire house. Then, sudden, sharp, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Something heavy hitting the floor. Michael froze, glass halfway to his lips. For a heartbeat, the house went silent again. The joy that had filled the room just seconds earlier slipped away, replaced by a creeping, cold awareness that he wasn't alone. The glass slipped from Michael's hand, shattering against the hardwood as he bolted up the stairs. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. every step echoing through the empty house. The noise had come from the master bedroom, the one with the half-open door and the drawn curtains. He pushed it open. The faint smell of antiseptic and something sweeter, perfume gone stale, hung in the air. On the floor beside the bed, a young woman lay crumpled in a silk robe the color of pale blue smoke. Her skin was ghostly white, damp with sweat, and her dark hair clung to her cheeks. For a moment, Michael thought she was dead. Then her lips moved. "Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper, fragile and trembling. Michael knelt beside her, his pulse racing. "It's okay. Don't move." He grabbed the blanket from the bed, wrapped it around her shoulders, and fumbled for his phone. His fingers shook as he dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a woman in my house, he said breathlessly. She's unconscious. Burning up, I think she's sick. I just bought this place today. I don't know who she is. The dispatcher's tone sharpened. Sir, is she breathing? Yes, barely. Please hurry. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens pierced the still night. The red and white lights flickered through the upstairs window, bathing the walls in a surreal glow. 2 EMTs rushed in, their radios crackling. They moved efficiently, checking her pulse, attaching an oxygen mask, sliding an 4 into her arm. Do you know her name, sir? One of them asked, glancing up. Michael hesitated. No, I just moved in today. The house was supposed to be empty. The EMT frowned, flipping through a small folder he found on the nightstand. This might be hers. Medical paperwork. Anna Lewis. The name hit him like a static spark. Lewis. Same as the seller. Are you family? The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. If he said no, they might delay treatment until they confirmed next of kin. If he said yes, I'm her relative, he heard himself say quietly. Please just help her. The EMT nodded, scribbling his name on the form. We're taking her to Ithaca General. She's dehydrated. Fever's high. She'll need observation. Michael followed them down the stairs, still dazed, watching as they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. When the doors shut, the night swallowed the sound of the siren as it disappeared into the distance, leaving only the hum of crickets and the faint smell of disinfectant in the air. He stood there for a long moment on the porch, the cool autumn breeze cutting through his thin shirt. Anna Lewis. The name rolled in his mind like an echo that wouldn't stop. Back inside, the house felt different, alive in a way that unsettled him. He sat on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through the real estate documents until he found the seller's contact information. Thomas Lewis. He dialed. It rang once, twice. Before a man's voice answered, casual, amused. Well, if it isn't my favorite buyer. Settling in all right. Michael's throat tightened. There was someone in your house. A woman. The medics said her name's Anna Lewis. She nearly died. A pause. Then laughter, slow, sharp, and cold. Ah, so you met her. What the hell is going on? Why was she there? You really want the truth? Thomas's tone turned mocking. Keep her. She's dying anyway. Consider it a little bonus for the discount you got. Michael's grip tightened on the phone. You left her there to die? Let's not be dramatic. She's my ex-wife. I told you I was selling everything. She didn't have much time left, so I figured, why not let the next owner deal with it? Win-win. Right. Then the line went dead. Michael sat frozen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence again. Outside, the lake reflected the dim moonlight, calm and indifferent. He pressed his palms together, the reality of it sinking in. He hadn't just bought a house. He had inherited a life. Morning came quietly over Seneca Ridge. A pale mist drifted from the lake, blurring the outlines of trees and rooftops. Michael hadn't slept. The night had passed in fragments, sirens, echoes of Thomas's voice, the image of that frail woman on the floor. By dawn, he was driving toward Ithaca General Hospital, the thermos of coffee beside him untouched. Inside the hospital, the sterile brightness made him feel strangely out of place. The air smelled of sanitizer and metal, punctuated by the rhythmic hum of machines. A nurse at the desk recognized him from the night before and gestured toward the hallway. "She's in room 214. The doctor will meet you there." When Michael stepped inside, Anna lay propped against a pillow, her face still pale but calmer. Her hair had been brushed back, revealing delicate features that carried both exhaustion and quiet strength. The oxygen line at her nose hissed softly. She noticed him and tried to smile. "You're the man from the house." Her voice was barely audible. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm Michael. You scared the hell out of me last night." A weak chuckle escaped her lips before she winced in pain. "Sorry for the trouble. My husband, Thomas, he was supposed to be home by now. He must have gone on another business trip." Michael's throat tightened. He didn't correct her. There was no way to explain the truth, not yet. Just then, the doctor entered, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard tucked under her arm. "Mr. Hayes? I'm Dr. Carrington. She's stable for now, but her condition requires specialized care, a neurological issue that needs advanced imaging and possibly surgery." Michael listened carefully, his eyes drifting to the machines beside Anna's bed. "You mean it's serious?" The doctor nodded. "It's treatable, but the sooner the better. We've been trying to reach her emergency contacts, but there's been no response." Michael hesitated. "Her husband, Thomas Lewis, he's out of the country." "That complicates things," the doctor said gently. "Without a legal representative or proof of insurance, we can stabilize her here for a few days, but she'll need a transfer to Mount Sinai in New York City for surgery. Someone has to authorize it." He looked at the fragile figure lying under white sheets, her hand resting loosely against the blanket. Anna met his gaze with quiet embarrassment. "I'll be fine," she murmured. "You don't have to stay. I'll figure something out when Thomas gets back." Her tone, soft, resigned, painfully polite, hit him harder than anger would have. She wasn't expecting anyone to stay. She'd already accepted abandonment as normal. Michael felt something twist deep inside him. For a moment, he saw another hospital room. 2 years ago, his father dying while his ex-wife scrolled through her phone, asking when they could wrap this up. The memory burned, vivid and ugly. He looked back at Anna. "You don't have to apologize," he said quietly. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her eyelids fluttered. "Still, thank you for calling the ambulance." Dr. Carrington handed him a clipboard. "If someone doesn't take responsibility for her transfer soon, she may lose her window for surgery. You can decline, of course. I just need an answer by tomorrow." Michael stared at the papers. Lines of legal text blurred before his eyes. Liability, consent, financial guarantor. The words felt heavy, final. He wasn't family. He wasn't even supposed to be here. But when he looked at Anna again, pale and small against the hospital bed, the decision was already made. He exhaled slowly, took the pen and signed. "I'll handle the transfer. Do whatever she needs." The doctor nodded. "You're doing the right thing. Maybe." But as Michael walked out into the crisp autumn air, he wasn't sure what right meant anymore. He had come to Seneca Ridge seeking peace. Now, he was signing hospital forms for a stranger who had no one left. 2 days passed in a blur of hospital corridors, muted announcements, and the soft beeping of monitors. Outside, the autumn leaves had already begun to fall, swirling across the parking lot like small flames. Inside, Michael sat in the waiting area with a cup of burnt coffee gone cold in his hands. He hadn't been home since that night. Sleep had become a distant concept. When Dr. Carrington came by for morning rounds, she offered him a tired smile. She's holding steady. The fever's gone down, and she's responding to medication. But the underlying condition hasn't changed. Michael nodded. You said it's neurological. The doctor hesitated, then motioned toward her office. Let's step inside. Behind closed doors, she opened a thin file and placed it on the desk between them. It's not my place to share full medical details without consent, she began carefully. But since you're listed as her emergency contact for now, here's what I can tell you. She has a degenerative neurological disorder, something that affects coordination and balance. The good news is with surgery and rehabilitation, her chances of recovery are strong. He exhaled slowly, part relief, part dread. So it's treatable. Yes, but she'll need advanced care, Mount Sinai or Columbia. Local facilities aren't equipped for this. Michael stared at the chart, numbers, scans, medical jargon that meant nothing to him, yet everything about it made his chest tighten. How long has she been like this? The doctor flipped a page. Months, possibly a year. She must have been deteriorating slowly. I can't imagine she was living alone. She wasn't. He thought bitterly. She was dying next to a man who was already planning his escape. After the meeting, Michael found the hospital's case manager and explained the situation, without mentioning the grotesque truth about the house sale. The woman was cautious but kind. You can apply to act as her temporary sponsor, she said. It's a legal arrangement. You'll have limited decision-making rights, enough to approve her transfer or cover immediate expenses until family is located. He nodded. Let's do that. There was a form, then another, and then more signatures than he'd ever placed on a mortgage. When he finished, he felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Not the weight of obligation, but of purpose. That afternoon, he visited Anna's room again. The sunlight cut through the blinds, painting soft stripes across her face. She was awake this time, her eyes clearer than before. Hey, he said quietly. How are you feeling? Better, I think. She tried to smile. The doctors are kind. For a while, they talked about simple things, books, autumn, the smell of rain outside the hospital windows. And then, as if something inside her loosened, she spoke. I met Thomas when I was 22, she began softly. My mom had just remarried. I was lonely, trying to find my place again. He was charming, older, confident, the kind of man who made decisions for you and convinced you it was love. Michael listened, saying nothing. We married fast. The house on Seneca Ridge was supposed to be our fresh start, but not long after I got sick. He said it was stress, that I should stop teaching, rest more. And then one day, he just stopped looking at me the same way, as if I'd turned into a responsibility he didn't ask for. Her voice trembled. He told me once that I ruined his life. I thought he didn't mean it, but maybe he did. Michael's stomach turned cold. The realization settled in piece by piece. Thomas hadn't simply abandoned her. He had sold the house with her still in it, a silent piece of collateral in his desperate trade for freedom. He looked at her, this fragile, dignified woman who still tried to smile through the wreckage, and felt anger rise like a storm he couldn't contain. Anna, he said gently, you're not alone anymore. I'm getting you the help you need. Her eyes flickered with confusion, maybe even fear. You don't have to, I know, he cut in, but I'm going to anyway. That evening, Michael stood by the hospital window, phone pressed to his ear as he arranged the transfer. Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City had a specialist ready. The paperwork would be processed within 48 hours. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one, their reflections dancing on the wet pavement. He hadn't planned on becoming anyone's savior, but as he hung up, he realized there was no turning back now. He was taking her to New York to give her a chance at life again. The skyline of Manhattan shimmered in the distance as Michael stepped through the revolving doors of Mount Sinai Hospital. The air smelled of rain and concrete, A mix of city life and quiet resolve. Anna had been transferred 3 days earlier, and each day he found himself returning without question, bringing books, flowers, or simply the sound of another human voice to fill the room. Her recovery was slow but steady. The color had begun to return to her face. She could sit up now, even manage short walks with assistance. Sometimes she'd joke softly that she was learning to breathe again, not just with her lungs, but with her soul. That morning she sat by the window, the city light spilling over her hospital gown like a soft veil. She turned when he entered, her smile faint but real. "You came again," she said. "I told you I would." He placed a small paperback on the table beside her bed. "A novel. Thought you might like something with a happy ending." Anna traced the cover with her fingertips. "Do they still write those?" "Not often enough," he replied. For a while they spoke quietly about books, about the maple trees upstate, about how the city sounded like it was breathing differently at night. She told him she used to teach literature at a high school in Ithaca before the illness, before everything had changed. He listened, genuinely listening, the kind of attention she hadn't felt in years. Then Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it briefly, then looked up with a small, conspiratorial smile. "There's someone here to see you." Anna blinked. "Someone." He nodded toward the door. "I thought you might want to see her." The door opened quietly. For a long moment, Anna didn't breathe. A woman stood there, elegant, silver-haired, clutching a trembling hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled with disbelief and tears in the same instant. "Mom." Eleanor Pierce crossed the room in 3 steps, her composure breaking. "Oh." Anna, her voice fractured under the weight of months of guilt and not knowing. She took her daughter's face in her hands, as if afraid she might vanish if she blinked. "He told me you were away, that you needed space, that you were getting treatment somewhere upstate. I called and called. But the number, he said you didn't want to talk." Anna's eyes shimmered. "He told me you'd moved on, that you had a new life, a new family." Eleanor shook her head fiercely. "No, sweetheart, never from you." The 2 women collapsed into each other's arms. Years of distance dissolving into tears and apologies that didn't need words. Eleanor sobbed openly, stroking her daughter's hair, whispering fragments of memories, childhood bedtime stories, the smell of lilacs in their old garden, the promise that no matter what had come between them, she had never stopped loving her. Michael stood quietly by the door, his chest tight with emotion. He'd seen tragedy before, seen people break, rebuild, and fall again, but this was different. This was love surviving its own ruin. He caught Eleanor's eye as she mouthed a silent "thank you." He only nodded. Stepping out into the hallway, he leaned against the cool wall and exhaled. The muffled sounds of their reunion drifted through the door, a blend of crying and laughter, the kind that comes when pain finally has somewhere to go. For the first time in weeks, Michael allowed himself to close his eyes, to believe that something good had come from all of this chaos. When he peeked back in a while later, the room was bathed in late afternoon light. Eleanor sat beside the bed, her fingers gently intertwined with her daughter's. Anna rested her head against her mother's shoulder, her eyes closed in peace. The world outside moved fast, horns, footsteps, the rhythm of the city. But inside that room, time stood still. 2 hands, one frail and one trembling, held on under the soft, golden glow of the hospital window. The city outside had gone quiet by the time Michael returned to Mount Sinai that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and glistening beneath the glow of traffic lights. He brought with him a small paper bag containing tea, a paperback novel, and a folded scarf Anna had once left on the chair, a soft, faded piece of fabric that still held her scent of lavender and hospital soap. When he stepped into her room, the lights were dimmed. Machines hummed softly, their rhythms steady and calm. Anna lay propped against her pillow, eyes open. staring out at the skyline through the tall window. The Empire State Building glowed faintly in the distance, its lights flickering like a heartbeat against the dark. She turned her head when she heard him. Couldn't sleep. He shook his head. You either. I tried. She smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the anxiety beneath. They told me the surgery's at 7. I'm supposed to rest, but it feels impossible. Michael set the paper bag on the bedside table. Then don't rest. Talk instead. She looked at him, her gaze soft but unsteady. About what? Anything, he said. How you used to teach. The students who drove you crazy. The books you couldn't put down. A fragile laugh slipped from her lips. You really think that'll make me forget what's coming? Maybe not, he admitted, but it'll remind you who you are. For a while they talked quietly about the novels she used to teach, her favorite line from To Kill a Mockingbird, and the way autumn in Ithaca always smelled like wet paper and wood smoke. The conversation drifted in and out like the tide, comforting in its ordinariness. Then, as silence settled again and his voice grew small, Michael. He looked at her. If I wake up, she hesitated, her fingers curling slightly over the blanket. Please be there. He didn't hesitate. He took her hand and held it firmly in his. I will. You have my word. Something in her face softened. She closed her eyes, and for the first time that night she looked peaceful. When morning came, the hospital stirred with the muted clatter of carts and footsteps. Nurses moved quietly through the halls. Michael sat outside her room, watching as they wheeled her toward the operating theater. She gave him a weak smile as she passed, her fingers brushing briefly against his. Then she was gone. The hours stretched into something shapeless. Michael found himself pacing the corridor, his thoughts spiraling. Every time the door opened, his head snapped up, hoping, fearing. He tried to read, but the words blurred. Tried to drink the hospital coffee, but it turned to ash on his tongue. He sat again. The scarf lay across his lap, soft and weightless, yet heavy with meaning. He rubbed it between his fingers, focusing on its texture to keep his mind from fracturing under the weighting. At one point, Dr. Carrington passed by, offering a brief, reassuring nod before vanishing through the double doors. And still, the clock on the wall refused to move any faster. By the 4th hour, Michael leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. His chest ached with a tension he couldn't name. Fear, exhaustion, devotion, all tangled together. He thought about how strange life was, how it could hand you someone else's tragedy and ask you to carry it until it became your own. Finally, footsteps approached. The doors opened. Dr. Carrington appeared, her surgical cap still on, a tired but unmistakable smile on her face. She made it, she said simply. For a moment, Michael couldn't breathe. The words took a second to sink in, and when they did, he exhaled shakily, a tremor running through his entire body. Relief washed over him in waves, raw, quiet, overwhelming. He pressed the scarf to his forehead, eyes burning, a broken laugh escaping him. Thank God. Dr. Carrington placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You can see her soon. She's resting. When she left, Michael stayed where he was, staring out the window at the gray morning sky. In that stillness, he realized something he hadn't felt in years, something pure and disorienting. Sometimes saving someone else feels like finding yourself. The snow along the Finger Lakes had melted into ribbons of silver water by the time Anna took her first unassisted step. It was early spring, crisp air, bright mornings, the kind that smelled faintly of pine and rain-soaked soil. The rehabilitation center overlooked the lake, a modest place surrounded by birch trees and budding lilacs. From her window, Anna could see the water shimmering like glass, rippling softly under the touch of wind. Michael had found the center himself. refusing to let her recover in the impersonal coldness of a city hospital. "You'll heal faster where the air feels alive," he told her. And so he came every day after work, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with wildflowers he'd picked from the roadside. At first, their visits were quiet. She'd sit wrapped in a blanket on the terrace, and he'd read aloud from her favorite novels. But as the days lengthened and her strength returned, their conversations began to stretch into laughter. One morning, she teased him for his habit of organizing the magazines on the side table by color. "You're hopeless," she said, smiling as she balanced herself on the parallel bars. "Order is underrated," he replied, watching her take another careful step. "Besides, someone has to keep this place civilized." Her laughter was small, but genuine, the kind that carried light into corners long left in shadow. As weeks passed, color returned to her cheeks. She began writing again, at first short reflections in a notebook Eleanor had brought her, then full pages of stories, small fragments about courage, memory, and second chances. Writing, she said, made her feel like herself again. Eleanor visited often too. She would bring homemade soup and books from Anna's old apartment, setting them gently by the bedside. One afternoon, as Michael was leaving, Eleanor stopped him near the door. "You know," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her emotion, "I don't think I'll ever find the right words to thank you." He shook his head. "You don't need to." But she persisted. "You brought my daughter back. Not just her body, her spirit. She used to love life like this, before she forgot how." Her eyes glistened. Michael could only nod, humbled by the sincerity in her voice. "She did the hard part," he said quietly. Still, Eleanor smiled in that knowing way only mothers do. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that we're worth saving. Later that week, Anna asked him to walk with her outside. The day was unusually warm for early April. The path behind the center wound down to the lakeshore, where cattails bent lazily in the breeze. She leaned on his arm at first, but soon she let go, testing her strength. "You're getting faster," he said. "I'm getting stubborn," she corrected him, grinning. They stopped by the water's edge, where sunlight broke across the surface like scattered gold. She closed her eyes and tilted her face toward the sky. "You can hear it, can't you?" "Hear what?" "Life," she whispered. "It's loud once you stop being afraid of it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the lake's quiet rhythm, the steady pulse of something new growing between them, something fragile but real. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Michael sat beside her bed, hands folded loosely in his lap. "I have to go back to Rochester for a few days," he said. "Work's been waiting longer than it should." Her smile faltered slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Then take care," she murmured, her voice soft as the fading light, "until you come back." He paused at the door, meeting her gaze one last time. The room was washed in the warm glow of twilight, the scent of lilacs drifting through the open window. "I will," he said, and for the first time in years he truly meant it. The first snow of the season arrived early that December, blanketing the hills around Seneca Ridge in a soft, silent white. Michael's house, once hollow and haunted by memory, now glowed with warmth and laughter. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and the scent of cinnamon and pine drifted through the air. Strings of golden lights framed the windows, where the snow outside shimmered like falling stars. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in years, the house was alive again. Eleanor sat near the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of mulled cider, smiling as she watched her daughter laugh across the room. Anna stood beside the piano, her hair loose over her shoulders, her cheeks bright from the warmth and wine. The room was filled with friends from the rehabilitation center, neighbors, and a few of Michael's colleagues who had driven in from Rochester. He had spent months restoring the old place, refinishing the floors, repainting the walls, and repairing the broken banister at the top of the stairs. It was no longer a symbol of tragedy. It was home. When the clock chimed 8, Michael raised his glass, clearing his throat lightly. The conversation quieted, replaced by the soft crackle of the fire. "I'd like to say something," he began, his voice steady but warm. "A year ago tonight I was sitting right here, alone in this house, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I bought these walls hoping to find peace, and instead I found something far more complicated and far more beautiful." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Anna looked at him curiously, her smile faint but knowing. Michael turned toward Eleanor, who was already watching him with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, his tone turning soft and reverent, "you once told me that I brought your daughter back, but the truth is she brought me back too. And so, with all the love and respect I have for both of you, I'd like to ask," he moved closer to where Anna stood, her breath catching as he reached for her hand, "may I have your daughter's hand in marriage?" For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Thick, bright, fragile. Then applause broke out, filling the air like the sound of breaking dawn. Eleanor laughed through her tears, nodding emphatically. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Absolutely yes." Anna covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the clapping, "you already have it." He smiled, slipping the small velvet box from his pocket. The ring glimmered under the amber light, simple, elegant, timeless. He took her trembling hand and slid it gently onto her finger. "I didn't think I'd ever find home again," he said softly. "Then you walked into it." She laughed through her tears, her voice breaking in the most beautiful way. "Technically, you found me first." The room erupted in laughter, glasses raised high in celebration. For a long moment, time seemed to pause, friends smiling, Eleanor dabbing her eyes, the firelight flickering against the window as snow fell quietly beyond the glass. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house was still again, Michael and Anna stood by the window together. The world outside was a painting of white and gold, the kind of stillness that only comes once a year, when even the air feels sacred. She turned her hand toward the light, the ring catching the faint shimmer of the falling snow. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So are you," he said, wrapping his arms around her. They stood there for a long while, watching the snow settle softly over the fields, the reflection of the fire dancing in the window. Neither of them spoke again. They didn't need to. The silence said everything, the pain behind them, the peace ahead, and the promise glittering gently between them. Outside, snow fell in slow, endless patterns. Inside, the ring on Anna's hand sparkled softly in the firelight. Quiet proof that love, when it finally arrives, doesn't need to be loud to be forever. Barcelona shimmered beneath the late summer sun, its streets alive with tourists and music. From the narrow alley behind a small restaurant near Los Ramblas, the scent of garlic, oil, and burnt bread drifted into the night. Inside, the kitchen roared with noise, pans clanging, orders shouted in Spanish, the dull rhythm of water slapping against steel. Thomas Lewis stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, his hands red and cracked from hours in the water. The heat pressed against him like punishment, thick and unrelenting. Every night felt the same: grease, noise, exhaustion, and silence at the end of it all. The man who had once worn Italian suits and dined on fine wine now scrubbed plates for tips that barely covered rent. A year had passed since he'd left America. His partner, the one he'd imagined a glamorous future with, had lasted 6 months before running off with a local musician, taking the last of his savings with her. The villa they had dreamed of was long gone. All that remained was a dingy apartment with peeling walls and the smell of mildew. He told himself he didn't care, that this was temporary, that someday he'd find another way up. But every morning when he saw his reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink, he barely recognized the man looking back. Eyes hollow, hair thinned, pride stripped away. "Louis!" the chef barked from across the kitchen. "2 more covers for table 4. VIPs, keep the plates spotless." Thomas grunted, rinsing a dish and setting it aside. He didn't look up when the waiter burst through the swinging door with a rush of perfume and chatter from the dining room. "Table 4, the waiter said, grinning. American couple, rich, polite, the type that tips like royalty. Thomas felt an odd pang in his chest, but kept scrubbing. It wasn't his business. Nothing was anymore. Minutes later, curiosity got the better of him. He glanced through the narrow service window into the restaurant. The room glowed golden with candlelight and crystal reflections. And there, at the center table near the window, sat a woman in a deep emerald dress, her hair swept neatly to one side, a soft laugh escaping her lips. Across from her sat a man in a tailored gray suit, his hand resting gently over hers. Thomas's breath caught. Anna. And Michael. He froze, every sound in the kitchen fading into a dull roar. His grip on the plate loosened, and it slipped into the sink with a soft clatter. The waiter looked back. "You okay, mate?" Thomas turned away, his face pale. "Fine," he muttered. "Just fine." He grabbed a towel, wiping his trembling hands, then reached for the cap hanging on the wall and pulled it low over his eyes. From his corner, he could see them clearly now. Anna leaned closer to Michael, smiling in that gentle way he remembered. Only now it wasn't the timid smile of a woman seeking approval. It was radiant, alive. Her movements were effortless, confident. She looked like someone who had built a new world for herself and left the ruins behind. Michael poured her a glass of wine, his expression calm, content, grounded. Together, they looked every bit the picture of grace and peace. Thomas stood there, watching the life that could have been his but never was. His throat tightened as shame crept up, slow and merciless. He turned his back to the window, focusing on the sink, scrubbing harder than before, as if the noise of it could drown out the sound of his own conscience. When the waiter came in later to drop off their plates, he whispered, "The Americans at table 4, nicest people I've met. They said the food was wonderful." Thomas didn't answer. He just nodded, his shoulders rigid. As the night wound down and the restaurant emptied, he finally dared to glance up once more. Through the glass pane, he saw them standing, putting on their coats. Anna turned briefly, her eyes meeting his through the reflection in the window. There was no anger there, no triumph, no vengeance. Only quiet acknowledgement. Then she looked away, slipping her hand into Michael's arm as they stepped into the cool Barcelona night. Thomas lingered by the sink, staring at the window where their reflections had vanished. His own face stared back, tired, unshaven, eyes rimmed with red. He touched the glass, his fingertips tracing the faint outline of where she had stood. For the first time, he didn't curse his luck or the world or anyone else. He just stared, realizing he no longer recognized the man in the reflection. The lights flickered, then went out, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the echo of what he'd lost. The Pacific shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, its waves curling toward the shore in slow, rhythmic breaths. From the veranda of their small villa on the Southern California coast, Anna could hear the faint cry of gulls and the whisper of wind moving through the eucalyptus trees that bordered the property. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, warm and alive. It had been 2 years since the cold corridors of Mount Sinai, since the sterile scent of antiseptic and the long nights of fear. 2 years since the woman who had once been left behind in a house of silence had stepped into the sunlight again. Now she lived by the ocean, where every morning began with light and ended with the sound of waves against rock, a rhythm that felt like forgiveness. The villa wasn't large, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Sun-bleached walls, wooden beams, shelves filled with books, and a writing desk facing the sea. It was at that desk, every morning for nearly a year, that Anna had written her book, page by page, memory by memory, until the manuscript lay finished beside her one spring morning. Its last sentence a quiet whisper of hope. That afternoon, she sat there again, one hand resting gently on her stomach, feeling the faint flutter of the life inside her. The doctor had called it a strong heartbeat. To Anna, it felt like the echo of everything she'd fought to keep alive: love, dignity, faith in the quiet goodness of the world. Michael appeared in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, his hair tousled from the ocean breeze. "You're working again," he said, smiling. "Just reading through the last chapter," she replied. "I still can't believe it's done." He walked over, glancing at the stack of papers bound neatly on her desk. "You should. It's beautiful, like everything you've built." She looked up at him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "We built it," she corrected. He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "You wrote the story. I just got lucky enough to be in it." Outside, the sun began to sink lower, spilling molten light across the horizon. The ocean caught it like a mirror, scattering gold and crimson across the waves. Anna stood, walking slowly toward the terrace doors, her fingers grazing the wooden frame. She stepped out barefoot onto the warm tiles, the hem of her linen dress brushing lightly against her ankles. The sea stretched endlessly before her, vast, untamed, eternal. She thought of everything that had come before: the house on Seneca Ridge, the loneliness, the cruelty, the moments when she thought she wouldn't survive another day. But here she was, not angry, not bitter, just still. Michael joined her, standing behind her, his arms circling her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood that way for a long time, saying nothing, watching as the sky deepened from gold to rose, then to violet. The sound of the waves was steady, grounding, eternal. "You ever think about him?" Michael asked quietly. She shook her head. "Not anymore. Life already answered him better than I ever could." He nodded, tightening his hold around her. "Then that's enough." Anna's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the last edge of the sun melted into the sea. For the first time, she didn't see the past chasing her. She saw only the future, the small life within her, the man beside her, the peace she'd earned one breath, one step, one act of courage at a time. A soft breeze swept through the terrace, carrying the faint scent of the ocean across their faces. Anna closed her eyes, leaning back into Michael's embrace, and as the evening settled over the coast, she whispered to herself, more thought than sound, words she had once written but never truly understood until now. Justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the life you rebuild with someone who chooses to stay.